Hello, hello, everyone who's joining. Hi, everyone. As you're joining, just remember that when you're putting things in the chat, select all panelists and attendees so everyone can see what you have to say. And let us know where you're coming from today. Yeah, I wonder how the audience will be today, if they are going to be awake and ready to go since it's Monday and it's our fourth week, which sounds kind of crazy. Done so many webinars. Good job, Bram, for getting everyone to agree to come to these webinars. Okay. I'm going to kick things off and just wait for everyone to join in. But, well, good morning for me and those of you in the Americas, and good evening to everyone on Ram and Vigi's side of the world, and Nishmita's, and good day to Leah's side of the world, who is in Spain today. International audience, as usual. Welcome to our fourth week, our 19th session, I think, of Coaching Across Boundaries. Today's session is going to be on coaching children, which should be rather coaching people who aren't adults, because we're going to be covering a bunch of topics that have to do with, not just kids, but teenagers, etc. I'll introduce the panelists second, but some housekeeping first of all. First of all, please join us for all the other sessions. We still have all week this week and all week next week. So you'll have a lot to learn, still coming. All the videos from previous sessions are up on our YouTube channel. So if all went well, when you close your Zoom session today, your browser should open up our YouTube channel automatically. So hopefully that works, but technology has not been our friend, so we'll see. In terms of comments and questions, please utilize the chat throughout the session. We'll pay attention as much as we can, but if for some reason you don't hear your question being asked, just hop into the Q&A and ask it. Please select all panelists and attendees when asking your questions so we can all see your comments. And what else? I don't actually remember because Ram's been doing these for the past week. So Ram, if I forget something, mention it later. But let's get started perhaps. So today's session is around coaching young people, coaching children. And on the panel with me today, we have a combination of coaches and parents and educators and counselors, people who have raised kids, people who have raised grandkids, people like me who've raised neither, but have nieces and nephews who teach us many things. So today we're going to be exploring the general topic of working with kids. Everything else that we've done so far has been really focused on adults. And I just thought that it would be interesting to explore where coaching sits in terms of actual coaching or mentoring children, teenagers who need it, as well as are there applications in parenting or in just relationships that we have with kids in our daily lives. And the reason why I was thinking about this was when Ram talks about coaching mastery, he has been using this phrase that it's asking with curiosity like a child. And it never really clicked to me until we were planning this series of webinars where I finally understood what he meant. When kids ask questions, they don't have any baggage with them. They just ask these questions out loud. And I thought to myself, if kids are really the masters at asking questions, then surely we should talk about them in a coaching context since they seem so important to it. So today is that forum. So let's actually kick things off. I'm going to actually ask my first question, and as panelists answer that question, please also just tell us a little bit about who you are and why you think you're here. versus why I invited you. And we'll go from there. I hope that's okay with everybody. Cool? Okay. Everyone's muted. It's kind of eerie when I'm talking to myself. Okay. So coaching is about having unconditional positive regard for your client and listening to what the client has to say and asking powerful questions of that client to help them get themselves from point A to point B. That's, I know it's generalized, but essentially that's what it is. But when I started thinking about working with adults versus children, one thing that occurred to me was that the reason why coaching works with adults is that adults have had life experience, they've gone through stuff that has helped them with learning to know themselves as well as learning how the world around them works. And depending also on, you know, the child's background or teenager's background, they may not have had literally very much life experience, or they might have had very tough life experience or very sheltered life experience. Point is, kids have a lot less life experience than adults do. So just starting with that, is coaching children even possible? Yes or no, and tell me why. Who wants to jump in first?
I'll go first, Magda.
Sure.
Yeah, I like yes or no kind of questions. You can always say I don't know and slip away, but I'm not going to say I don't know. Uh, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. Um, Second time in a few days. Very privileged to be here and, you know, sharing space with other panelists. Also, topic, you know, not just close to my heart, but I think is exciting because every time as a coach, I work with children. I just come out feeling so much younger myself. Not that that's a reason to coach, but just saying.
It's a good byproduct.
Yeah, sure. So just answering your question by a very broad definition, right? The way ICF defines coaching, it's a thought-provoking and creative process of partnership to maximize personal and professional potential. So by that definition, I don't see why children should be excluded or why, you know, there's anything that will sort of distinguish them in that sense to not be um, not not to experience coaching. I think coaching is for everyone. As we go along, I think we'll also discuss that maybe the format, the way, the form is probably different, but I think the substance, the essence is still about maximizing potential. So absolutely doable.
Awesome. Invite to jump in, but I'm also wondering, as you're answering the question, are all kids, all ages, okay to be coached, or do you think there's a particular age at which point it actually is beneficial?
This is again based on my experience, and I'd love to know what the other panelists have to say about this. But I think certainly from an age where they are able to have an independent conversation, able to put across independent views, I would think maybe ages 10, 11 and above.
Okay, interesting.
Highly
Mishmita,
possible.
you look like you're going to
I've not
in.
worked with kids in a coaching context younger than that, so
okay.
my information is limited. But I would think that's important to be able to hold a conversation, and of course that assumes independent thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go?
Please.
So I think you can use a coaching approach even when kids are small. Not pure coaching as we're coaching adults now, because we cannot think of this topic in terms of coaching adults. The coaching children is slightly different. So you can use the coaching approach, and I see many schools as young as preschools use now a very asking approach, you know, an engaging, asking, connecting approach where children are engaged in the life skills they are learning versus told what they are learning. So I see the skills used in coaching, or the qualities of coaching, or a coaching approach being used in even little children at preschool level.
So I'm actually going to share a quick screenshot from our blog for anybody who is interested. This is the What is Coaching blog on coacharya.com/blog, just what Cindy was referring to, kind of where coaching sits versus all the other things we'll be talking about today. I know Leah, for example, who I would love to hear from. Leah does mentoring as well as counseling. So it's interesting how her work with kids is in the kind of right side of this diagram. Leah, do you want to jump in and give us a bit of your feedback?
Oh, hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. What an international audience. Wow, I feel really honored. So hello, everyone in the world. My background is mentoring and coaching young people. I'm self-taught and lots of little courses and big courses in there as well, and VQs here and there, and youth work. Postgraduate diploma is my kind of academic background, and a lot of the skills that you learn as a youth worker, they're mentoring, they're coaching. And what I can say there, I've worked in the UK, in Yorkshire, Merseyside, and across Africa, in Zambia, Uganda, and Kenya, in specifically mentoring and coaching. What I can say is, wow, imagine if every single child and young person had access to mentoring and coaching. Just imagine the potential. Think of people like Greta Thunberg and social media movements, youth movements. Everyone has the potential to be like that. It takes some fantastic adults and some fantastic peers to encourage you through. And what better way than mentoring and coaching? So I mentioned mentoring a lot because we've had a discussion about age now. I work with 13 to 19-year-olds mostly, and higher, but for the purpose of this, teenagers we'll talk about. And for me, the two really complement each other with mentoring coaching. Coaching asks those questions for personal development, growth, general, mentoring, is very, very general, and it explores everything about their growth. Whereas coaching, you can be very specific. It's also youth-led, led by the young person. However, they're still developing, their body is developing, their personality is developing, their values, their mind's still developing. So mentoring alongside gives that extra little bit of help, that extra knowledge, background. You've been in that path and you can help them move along. And it's also a very good way to get young people out doing activities. So that's why I love the two together. You know, young people sometimes don't have these opportunities. If you think about schools, imagine if all the schools taught mentoring coaching to young people. Just imagine all those social skills, problem solving, etc. So yes, for me, I think anybody can be mentored, coached. Coaching as it is, probably older. Probably teenagers benefit a lot from those deep questions that you ask in coaching. Mentoring though, 5 years plus. You know, I've seen really good examples in the UK of charities that have worked with children from 5 years onwards in a mentoring capacity. However, there's no reason why you can't use models of coaching at an age appropriate level. So, yeah, thank you.
As Ram said in a previous session, there's no uncoachable client, only unclientable coaches. So I guess applying that to this situation, all of us should be able to work with anybody, any age.
Exactly.
Vishmita, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm trying to look at this from an educator's point of view, and I completely agree with what's been said so far. I think asking deeper questions, like Leah said, it can start at an age like that's a little bit older when they're reaching their tweens. but I think the practice of asking questions can start at a very young age. I think that helps because then you're encouraging the child to think for themselves. And that's a much better way of teaching a child anything, because when we just tell them, I feel like we're underestimating the intelligence of the child, whereas when we're asking questions, we're sort of helping them figure things out for themselves. Some ways I think that are very helpful, even if going back to what you said about how children might have limited experiences, it's obviously going to be an experience that they're going to connect to given the situation that you're coaching them in. But also something that can help is creating a scenario and doing a sort of role play in there, and then asking the child how they would react in that situation. I think that that's a very that's a way that not only helps them and think and start problem solving, but also a great way to teach them to empathize. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Magda, I just want to jump in here,
Yeah, please.
even though I may not be invited, but
You're always invited, Ram.
thank you. So what comes up early in my, very, very early, when I was learning to drive, I was taught one thing, and I think it serves very well for how we understand there's a difference between children and adults. If you encounter as a motorist a child crossing a road, you always swerve in a direction away from where the child is moving, not expecting the child to heed your honk or whatever it is. And that's exactly what happens when a dog or a cat or a deer crosses a road. The instinct is very different. When an adult, the instinct is very different. Unfortunately, instinct is conditioned and the adult steps back. So you always swerves away from the direction or towards the direction the person is moving, so you know that the person is going to step back. I think there's a very fundamental difference if we can understand that and apply it to coaching, whatever else it is. The child is fearless, the child is carefree, the child is inquisitive, the child is without bias, without judgment. And the more I work with my grandchildren, eldest of whom is about 5 today, and I understand that more and more. I have, you know that, you with us, and when I was in Santa Monica, I used to walk a mile to her bus in the morning, start totally unwilling, like that Shakespearean 7 stages where the unwilling child going to school with a satchel. I used to carry her satchel, but still. And we used to have this existential conversations about evolution, about why people should be educated and what happens if they are not. And when I tell her that, look, something may happen because people in India, for instance, they don't have the opportunity. Why don't they have the opportunity? It's amazing. I think working with young children is for anybody who's learning. It's not about coaching with any kind of a perspective. That's where I am a little careful when Leah says mentoring. Yes, in a school environment where you want to create certain sociability factors, et cetera, hygiene factors, maybe. But at the same time, if you want to expand their minds, is there a completely different approach that needs to be done? It's a very existential philosophical question. So when you talk about the age, traditional coaching wisdom I was advised is don't ever work with your children as a coach. I found one of the most valuable feedback that I have got is from coaching my children. As long as you stay without judgment and you let them emote and not become part of that emotional burden, it works. Or as Nishmita is working with absolute vision that she wants to work with young adolescents, boys and girls, in terms of creating a vision for them, a dream for them or something like that, in terms of trying to find out what their limiting beliefs are, at the same time, what their needs are. I worked as a coach with people around 18, 19, very comfortably without a problem. 12, 13, with some difficulty. When they would extract a promise from me, you wouldn't tell that to my mother, would you? I say, I swear on my honor, I wouldn't. And that is what it is, really, because for the most part, they do not trust certain things with their parents. It's unfortunate, terribly unfortunate. And then they would like to go to someone else. They could go to a peer, which is what they often do, and that is where most of the problems arise because they are equally clueless about what needs to happen. So can there be people to whom they can go who could be completely unbiased, who have that, as you said, that was a brilliant question that you started with, unconditional positive regard with no bias, and I'm here to expand your mind, whatever it takes, whatever your curiosity takes you. So that is where I would put it. Yes, at different ages it's going to be different, but what Leah said, yes, I understand why she is saying what she's saying, because I worked with educators, coaching them in terms of people who are working with young children in schools. There is a need there because there is a need for things like social hygiene and other factors in terms of what they need to do. But at the same time, unfortunately, mentoring comes from the experience of the mentor, the expertise of the mentor, the conditioning, the baggage, the garbage of the mentor. So what is there to ensure that what is being transferred from the mentor to the child is not the garbage? So are we constantly be aware of it? I mean, the same is true of a coach as well. So if you are careful about that, how do we do that? I think that's really where the difference lies. Thanks.
So there's actually a bit of chat on this topic in the chat. And if people are asking, you know, if you are coaching a child, a young person, is a parent better positioned to do that? Because there's an element of someone that they know, because there's an element of trust already in that relationship. Or is it a stranger? Because a stranger won't have the emotional baggage, I want to say background, whatever it is, for the child. So I'm especially keen to hear from VG and Cindy, both of whom are coaches and parents. What do you think? I know, Cindy, you mentioned to me in an email that when you were raising your kids, you actually used a coaching approach without really knowing that you were doing coaching. I'm keen to hear about that, since the audience seems to really want to know about that.
Yeah, when they were early teens when I started coaching, when I learned to coach. So of course I was very curious and quite eager to demonstrate what I was learning on them, you know, without them knowing. Of course, I would never dare tell them that, but they do pretend now like they knew. But it's really wonderful how you can help with, you know, when they come up with lots of dramas and stories, and you use a coaching approach, like helping the client to identify in the big story what they want to work on. And in the story, when you are, like, for example, when they come home after an exam, you know, that exam was so difficult and they all upset, throw the bags down and storm into the rooms, doors are closed, and I would go, open the door. Well, what was difficult about that? And help them narrow it down. And in the end, I would go, so it was just 5% that you're worried about? You know, so a coaching approach kind of worked consistently with various parts. And it worked especially well when, as they got older, because, you know, then their mouths were, you know, too confident, overconfident, and too much to kind of slam down everything with, you don't understand. So I would quietly ignore the don't understand part and just reflect on something else that would lead or slightly progress the place where they were stuck into something more. So this kind of coaching approach really works. And I think because I had teenagers, and in my profile at that point, I would say, you know, I've got teenagers and watching them grow up. My first lot of clients were parents bringing their teenage children to me. And so what I want to say, that's that's having to consider different stakeholders, like, you know, parent, child, and how you work with the child and partner with the parent too in that process. And I didn't know this, so I learned as I went along, you know, what were boundaries, what was expectations, how to work with the child. Because very different working with children. There's got to be this light element, a fun side. And you've got to start to acknowledge every small win so they can build on wins and kind of filter into life lessons for themselves. So they carry it throughout with them. I'll stop there.
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. I think I'd like to build on a lot of what you're saying. But before that, I saw a comment in the chat box from Ferdinand. Is there a straight line approach, parent versus stranger? I don't think so. I don't think there can be a straight line approach at all. Wouldn't be fair, really, because and let me tell you why I think so. I think as parents, all of us have our own unique parenting styles. Some of us naturally adopt a coaching style. Some of us, it's more, sharing our own experiences, more bordering on mentoring. And for some, it is just outright telling. And I don't think we can sit in judgment as to what's a better style. Because every parent knows their child, well, I mean, best. And I don't think it's fair to pass judgment. So a parent who I think is naturally on a coaching style, by default 80-20 in the conversation, right? Listening a lot more, appreciating a lot more, asking those questions, just letting them be sometimes, I think probably can be as good a coach as is a professional stranger coach who comes in to coach. But I think if you're not wired that way, it could be very difficult and very challenging. And someone told me this recently, saying that, so you must always be a coach at home. I certainly don't want to be that, because I believe coaching is just one part of my role, and I bring in value as just being mother. And sometimes I'm just happy to just be mother, not be coach. So I think it just depends on the kind of person the coach and the parent is. Now, flipping it to the other side, right? Since I've been fortunate to work with parents who've entrusted, I think, that very sacred space to me. And I think it takes a lot of trust on behalf of the parent to entrust, because the parent is the sponsor. The child is not adult to take a decision in that. To get into the coaching relationship, like Cindy said, there are beautiful dimensions that emerge, especially this, it's not even a three-way partnership. It becomes a four-way partnership. There's a mother, there's a father, there's the client, and there's you. And oftentimes, while you have to give hold the trust of the child in absolute confidence, I think it's very important to keep the parent in the loop and still sort of be neutral. I was just telling Cindy, about this almost adult that I'm working with. A wonderful client I'm learning so much from about life. We're done with our sessions, and the debrief now, typically, in a corporate engagement, right? You'd have the sponsor coming in, and it's a different dynamic. But in this case, the entire debriefing, the entire sharing of the process, all of that is going to be done completely by the client. And my role, I think, is just going to be a very important cheerleader for the client. Very much in the background, but if required, stepping into the foreground. So I think we as coaches can bring in fantastic value to help other young adults in figuring out, moving ahead on their crossroads. So that's the message I just want to leave to all coaches in this room today.
I would think, that all of us are learning from every client that we are working with, at least in my small experience that I've had with this so far. That's definitely the case. But I will tell you, when we were planning this session, I I have a dog, as all of you know, and I walk this dog very much. And next to my house is a park and a playground. And inevitably, there's always kids of different ages playing at the playground, and they always want to come and say hi to Sailor. And we have conversations because they ask about him, and I tell them, okay, he used to be abused. That's why he has little skippity hop when he walks, and you know, he's happy and of course loved now, but he had a really tough beginning. And they'll ask me questions, and you know, something comes out from their life. A lot of times they tell me about deaths in their family or somebody getting hurt in their family, not just animals. And it's been interesting playing this session, just how much looking at it from like a coaching perspective and asking different questions to them, knowing the session was coming up. I've gotten so much more out of these little conversations that I'm having with these kids on the playground that just want to come say hi to my dog. I've been amazed just from small interactions how much you can learn from kids, and just wanted to throw that in there because I don't have kids, maybe never, but I love them. Didn't used to, but they can teach us a lot. Anyway, I kind of want to throw things to Leah because I'm keen to hear how much she's learned from her interactions, because her entire career has been working with young people. So I imagine that what we've been just talking about has been exponentially large learning for Leah.
Very much. Thank you, Magda. And it was really interesting listening to everyone and from different perspectives as well. So a lot of my background has been working with teenagers who maybe haven't had the best upbringing or the best relationships with parents. Some have had wonderful relationships. And in that case, oh yes, parents would benefit so much from coaching their children and learning those skills. I think I saw something recently from another organisation where they shared during mental health, International Mental Health Day, some questions saying if parents ask these questions their children, there would be such stronger relationship with them. So questions, for example, if you could change anything in your life, what would it be? And just these exploratory children can open up so much and actually bring parents closer to young people. And I think even the teenagers that I worked with who didn't have those good relationships, this would have really helped. And coaching for the parents as well. Things like, what makes you feel calm and safe? What difficulties are you facing in your life now? And these conversations are so super powerful. I do believe that coaching parents and young people is very powerful together. You know, a mentor or coach is not in the life of that young person forever. And it's very, very, very important to prepare for moving on. You know, the coaching relationship needs to have a clear closure, especially with young people, because closure is very, very difficult. And that might be a year, ideally, minimum of 6 months, 18 months, probably maximum more or less. It depends on the project. That's from my personal experience. So to work with the parents as well just has such a massive impact. So that was very much kind of my point of view is, yes, wow, let's coach parents too and teach those coaching skills.
Yeah, let's coach everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people in the chat are actually sharing their stories of coaching their own kids. So I encourage everyone to have a read through. There's some interesting things in there, which I try to scan and read up a few out loud. So Leah, when coaching parents along with the kids is great, but I'm guessing that's not always possible. And I'm guessing that presents its own challenges. So I'd love to hear what doesn't go so well when you're working, first of all, with parents and the child, and then as well as just working with the child specifically, things that you wouldn't experience with just coaching adults.
Okay, I mean, I haven't directly coached adults older than 25 years old, but from a teenage kind of point of view as well, a lot of young people are trying to separate, forming their own identity, their own personality, away from the parents to become individual, to find out who they are as well. So sometimes, you know, they don't want to be coached by the parent, they want other people to come in and to open up about things that are quite deep and personal to them, so they can explore who they are, what their purpose is, where their potential lies, but also things like they're going through puberty. There's conversations around that. Their brain's starting to think of other things, sexual health, relationships, all kinds of things. So I think sometimes those conversations can work better separately. However, there are some absolutely amazing parents out there who have started these conversations early on, and that trust is there. Every single situation is unique. Every time. It completely depends on that relationship that is already existing.
Thanks, Leah. Others, I would love to hear about the challenges from you as well. One thing that comes to mind for me is just thinking back to when I was in high school. Vulnerability is really hard, and I know that this generation is much different, and thank goodness kids these days are giving me a lot of hope. They care about a lot more stuff than my generation did. They're a lot more open and accepting, which is all amazing. But I imagine that being vulnerable, it's hard for anybody at any age, but especially when, like Leah mentioned, you're going through puberty and of everything else, social pressure. So yeah, to me, that seems like an obvious challenge. Are there any other challenges you can share around working with young adults, children?
Magda, I just want to share this story.
Sure.
One of the greatest psychologists ever lived was Milton Erickson. And for a large part of his life, many of you may know about Milton Erickson, otherwise read about him. Lots of families came to him with their children. And there's a very famous story about a young child the parents could never manage. The child used to throw a tantrum at everything. So they brought him, and Milton asked the parents to leave the room. And something Milton said, and Milton was in a wheelchair. He had damaged lungs from early childhood, or 18 years. So he was in a wheelchair. He got himself out of the wheelchair and kneeled on the floor at the same height as the child. And when the child started screaming, Milton started screaming at the child. And after maybe half a minute or whatever, Milton said, if you're going to scream, I will also scream. So you decide what you want to do, how you want to communicate with me. Within 2 minutes, Milton and the child were having an adult conversation. It's an extreme case. It's a beautiful story. Read that book. And there are multiple stories about Milton Erickson, how he rode on a horse. People were scared without a saddle, a horse that had lost its way. And after some 10 miles or something, it reached a farmer's gate. And the farmer asked, how the hell did you know it was my horse? He said, I didn't know, the horse knew. That was exactly the principle that he used for working with children. The children know something beautiful. And also put it back the other way, the parent's role is probably the toughest task that any of us face. As a male, I was totally useless as a parent. My wife did all the rearing work, all the nurturing work, all the coaching work. But today, I'm so proud that our son-in-law, they are so much more hands-on. And they work with their children so closely. And so things are changing. And Vanessa said somewhere about the peer relationship. That's exactly what it is. Even to the extent of maybe you have to sit down on the floor with them or do whatever that you have to. Maybe you have to go on all your fours and to be able to interact with them. Whatever that you do, are you able to do that at that age? Maybe when they are 5, 6, 7, 4, whatever it is. And as you grow older, you devise other ways. One of the things, I'm curious, Nishmita, you have worked with adolescents, and you've shared some of your experiences with me, and they have been amazing, and what you want to do with them. Can you share a little bit about what is it that you found, what is it that worked, and what is it that doesn't work? Thank you.
So something that's been going on in my mind as all of you have been speaking is going back to Ram's line about how, there's no such thing as an uncoachable client. but there is something as an unclientable coach, because I think children and young adults, they haven't learned this whole thing about, you know, suppressing their emotions or masking them. They haven't mastered it yet. So by default they become brutally honest. So if we are like, you know, we bother enough to listen, then, like, just by their actions, maybe not every time by what they're saying, but they're telling you exactly what they need and what they want. And if coaching is all about helping the client be honest with themselves, or honest, you know, with whatever they're feeling, then who does it better than them, right? The challenge, I think, comes in with us not, with the children saying things that we don't want to hear or we're not ready to hear. And a simple example, I remember as a teacher one time, you know, I put in so much effort into making this fancy lesson and going into class, and then one by one things are, like, you know, started falling off from the plan. And I started getting a little flustered, and then there was this one boy and he was just sitting like this and they weren't responding. So I asked, what's the problem? And he's just like, we're bored. And it was like a slap on my face, but it's the truth, you know. And it does hurt your ego, but then if you're really listening, they're just telling you that they're not learning right now because I'm not teaching them in the way that they want to learn. They're not understanding, which is why they're bored. So the next step would be to ask them questions and see what would work for them. If they're behaving badly, yes, it's frustrating at that point, but to find out why is so very important, I think. So I think if we want to become better parents, better teachers, better coaches, I think learning to coach children is the best way to go, because that really challenges your ego and that really helps become a better person. Yeah.
Nishmita, I'd like to add on, build on the challenges, right? It's just so true. And I think there was a question from Sahana as well. How do you sort of handle, you know, the varying mood swings? And, you know, suddenly they just don't want to talk. And I see a lot of this as well. And I think the best way to deal with that, which would never happen in a contracted, pre-scheduled adult coaching session, right? Whether the client is up to it or not, right? They will turn up. They may turn up only bringing 20% of them to the coaching session. But a child, when not ready, and more so a teen when not ready, just won't turn up. And I think that's a far more authentic space to be in. But I think as coaches, we need to be, and I think Cindy mentioned it earlier, right? You know, bring in that element of fun. And I think we need to be absolutely flexible, agile, right? If the client is not ready, it's better to just call off that session. Or if they just come and they just want to sulk throughout the session, so be it. There's fantastic clarity that could emerge. I think the challenge is us as coaches. We are so used to and you know, in expectation of a certain client behavior. So I'd like to say that there are no boundaries, and I think there are no sort of structures or models. My biggest learning was time. Usually in working with an adult, 60 minutes is often not enough. And the session, you know, like most coaches can probably relate to, would spill over to 1 hour, 15 minutes, 1.5 hours, right? And then you'd have to call time. My greatest learning was in working with teams. They come into the session and maybe it's their ability to have fantastic direct communication, to be vulnerable in a moment, right? To just get straight to the point. That the session is over in 25 minutes flat. And you're like, that's it? And the first 2 times it was a little uncomfortable. And I was like, hey, 1 minute. I mean, you know, have I sort of gotten deep enough? Have I explored enough? Yeah, I mean, wearing my coach hat. And then I said, here's this human being who is quite happy with the value they've got in 25 minutes. So it's okay, let them go and let's call off the session. That to me was a great learning, to be able to reinvent the model. Or similarly, so you sign up for 8 sessions, sometimes you're done in about 5. So now, whenever I talk with parents of teens, I always sort of say, plus minus, and we should be ready for it, and I should be ready for it. I mean, we know as coaches, right? You contract for 8 sessions and you believe you work with that. So I think flexibility and agility are huge challenges, and so are patience and resilience. Sometimes it is just so difficult to get through. And this is an age group that will tell you to your face, you're not working for me. But that's beautiful. So challenges, which I think can be great growth opportunities for us as coaches.
I think it's quite funny how, the question I asked was challenges. I left it open, but everyone's responding with challenges around the coach. It sounds like children are actually much better clients than adults and much more efficient clients. But Vijay, actually something and I know I see Leah wants to jump in, but you said, I think, that if the client's not ready, they're not ready. And Priya commented that the theme that she found with children is that no one listens to me. So I'm just curious, in working with teens and knowing all the things we've discussed so far that make them easier but also more difficult potentially to work with, I mean, how do you know if they are ready for the session, or if they're just, you mentioned sulking or being quiet, for example. What if that's just, they're coming at it with, no one listens to me, why should I speak to this coach person? How is this going to be different than everything else I've experienced so far?
Can I jump in? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
No, Leah, you go. Yeah.
So, sorry to jump in. I just wanted to give an example, because especially teens that might have behavioural issues or don't have trust in adults, and especially with the examples I've worked with, they don't have much trust. They may not have ever formed good relationships with teachers or family, and they come into your very first session and they will test you. They will. They want to know that they can trust you. And it might not just be the first session. It could be the first, second, third. By the third, you're usually doing all right. But teens, not in general, but mostly, will test you. They may shout, they may scream, they may swear. I've had teenagers jumping on the table, to the chair, to the floor, health and safety nightmare. But they're waiting for you to react. And they're waiting for you to react like their teacher, react like their parents, react to the people that tell them stop doing what they're doing. But as coaches, we don't do that. As coaches, we're trying to explore why they're doing what they're doing and go at their pace, let them lead, what they want to change. And once you haven't responded with don't do that, but oh, what could I do better? Or what could we do now to make this better? And you're super resourceful as well. I always say when working with young people, remember everyone has different learning approaches, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, whichever. Have everything there. I have a ball in the room, I have posters and papers and pens, sometimes calming music if it's possible, a little background video of a YouTube, relaxing, everything that you can possibly do. And once you haven't reacted, that trust builds and the behavior turns more to respect. And once there's a dual respect, you have already taught that young person some massive things and they're learning it for themselves and then applying it. So that was one of the biggest things. I think I would like to come back after you've spoken, Vijay, about safeguarding as well, if possible. Thank
you. No, you can go on, Leah.
Leah, I just want to ask you something. What you said was amazingly beautiful. Allowing that teenager to jump on the table, do whatever they have to do. And that's really the coach's approach. But earlier when you spoke about, maybe I misunderstood, you talked about mentoring rather than coaching. And I'm curious to know, therefore, if this is what you call as mentoring, then coaching to me is sublime. Maybe a space that we would never reach. I'm not quite sure.
I think, Ram, that the two interlink very much when working with young people. They are methods of coaching. I totally agree, and using models of coaching to communicate, definitely. I think from the mentoring point of view is to bring in stories, age appropriate. You can't be telling young people your life, but age appropriate stories or examples. But also with a lot of young people that I've worked with, they haven't even been to a nature reserve or the local museum or things. So bringing in the activities side of mentoring, so a day out or a trip out, and inspiring through that. That's what I mean by interlinking the two. However, the tools I use, very much coaching, very much.
The mentoring that you're talking about is completely different. My concept of mentoring, I'm sorry about that. So the mentoring you're talking about is really being the same state as a child, what Carl Rogers calls a congruence, and expressing your own authenticity about the needs of the child the same way. Salute you. Thanks.
Of course. For me, I guess when working with young people, and especially as a youth worker, there's quite a lot of buzz around mentoring young people. And I think the term in itself is umbrellaed kind of coaching as well. I was going to refer to a book before, because there's a book in the UK that I've read, is Every Child Needs a Mentor, by Herman Stewart. And I think it is, whenever there was funding or projects brought about, it was a mentoring youth project. Whereas actually I call myself a life coach and a coach because I use all those tools. So I think even for myself, the two have become so interlinked that probably that confusion has come about, but they seem to both work quite well together. Okay. In regards to challenges, I did want to mention safeguarding, because you're working with children, you're working with under 18s, and in every country, in every situation, this is very different, but safeguarding is super, super important. And also as a coach, it is different to work with young people than adults. When a child discloses to you that they may be being abused or hurt, it can be emotionally very difficult, and it's very important to be aware of what to do if you get a disclosure, how to react. Very much in coaching is using those open questions. That's so super important, but also how to report that and what to do with it. And in the moment, not to show, start crying or show shock. These are really important skills to learn if you are going into coaching young people. And to be able to give all that information in the appropriate ways to your safeguarding lead, safeguarding board, but also to protect you as a coach. I'm really passionate about supervision and ensuring that the coach or the youth worker can debrief after a safeguarding disclosure. So it's just something I wanted to mention, is always make sure that there's somebody you as a coach can speak to and can reflect on, and hopefully that would be a safeguarding lead. If it's a school, if it's not a school, then you need to explore who that most appropriate person is. And there are laws around safeguarding as well, and what we say to children, we can't always keep promises. So to always remember that in the background. And I think just to mention about parents, I do know that some coaches, mentors, don't always collaborate with parents and the family. And I think that creates a challenge in itself. So I think it's very, very important to collaborate in that way. Yeah, I think there are so many challenges. We could literally go on. Matching. So can everyone coach a young person? No, I don't believe they can. Training's really important, and reading. I've got loads of books. If anyone does want to contact me, I can give lots of recommendations on books and places to go. Thank you.
And if anyone's looking for a coach as well, because Leah is just starting her company, which I need to pitch because she's so gracious to be on our panel. I'll send you guys information about this later too. But Leah is starting her own new venture around this space. So
thank you, Magda. Actually, I did notice a question about online mentoring coaching. So I'm actually setting up an online coaching business for teenagers and young people. And I think it is, a way forward as well. A lot of young people that I've worked with, they feel safe behind the screen. This is a new a new way of communicating. We're evolving all the time through technology. It's going to be a lesson for me as well. This is very new, because things like body language, a lot of my youth work, when we were talking about behavior before and testing, a lot of the way that I worked was mirroring. So if I've got a young person who, let's say, won't speak, you can have the opposite. They're very quiet and shy and hiding. I would sit next to them or whatever's appropriate and do a little bit similar. And then you open up your body language to kind of get that young person to open up too. And it's very powerful. So that will be a challenge for the future, which I can update you on soon. But young people are comfortable, and I think the chat whilst with the video, and also the security of being able to shut the video off if they want to, I think is very good as you're getting to learn and know about that young person. So,
yeah, we'd love to hear about that when you have some experience. But it occurs to me that again, this generation, it's so different than previous generations. They're used to being on screens. You know, I know that you work in Africa quite a bit, but most of Africa kind of skipped a whole technology, right? They went straight from having no phones to having cell phones and now smartphones. So it's much easier for kids these days, I think, to adapt to this mode of interaction. So that's, you know, that's
definitely
a good thing.
And also coaching for me is all about global development as well. I mean, as I said, I'm very passionate about inspiring and enthusing and encouraging young people, because we've seen with the youth movements, youth voice at the moment, and we have the internet. I've worked in some of the most rural villages, you know, in Africa, and they have internet. It's easy to communicate. It might not be the best communication, and sometimes there's problems with the internet connection, but it is possible. And I think there is a lot of potential in this in the future for global development as well as youth development.
Yeah, something tells me this could be an entire session of webinars, because some of the questions that are coming up in the chat are pretty huge. So I do see that Cindy and Shweta want to jump in, but I want to address a couple of questions that are in the chat. So if somebody could cover them, that would be great. So a specific one, what would be a good icebreaker for a child who's been sent for coaching and probably won't be forthcoming? I think that's interesting. Another one.
Can I answer that?
Oh, sure.
That specific question? Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Donna. That's a wonderful question. And here I want to share that most times the child client who comes in doesn't understand what coaching is and does not understand what a coach does. Today, both my teens at home, they kind of know what I do. In fact, my daughter asked me last week, so what's the difference between you and a therapist? Of course, I did a double take that she knew what therapy was. I didn't know that at her age of 12 and 13. But she very casually says, yeah, it's the same thing as therapist. So I'm not sure they get it. But the interesting thing is that I don't think they need to get it. If you can be, you know, if you can offer unconditional positive regard, you can partner with the child, you can work towards achieving potential. I think that's good. The child does not really need to understand what you do or that you're a coach. So how do you approach that first session? By the sponsored client who's, you know, just come in to meet you. Often the parent would say, hey, you know, why don't you meet, you know, this auntie, or, you know, that's how usually I'm referred to, right? So, you know, just for a chat. That's very non-threatening. That's okay. And oftentimes they are also coming in to judge you, gauge you. Yeah. What is this auntie going to advise me? Usually advice. So they come in with a lot of mental baggage. They don't want to listen to advice. So I think that's when you just be, you know, a buddy. Yeah. Somebody who's curious, who's a little fun, who's interesting, who's willing to talk their language and listen to their language. And I think from there, the relationship develops fantastically, offering you that space to build trust and intimacy. And then you go about doing your job as a coach. So I would say not being hung up about the fact that the client needs to know what coaching is and what you do as a coach, I think is important.
That's super helpful, Vijay. Thank you. It actually goes into another question I wanted to ask of the panel. We talked about different characteristics of what makes a coach clientable for this age group, and patience and flexibility came up a lot. We talked about mirroring potentially behavior, but yeah, I'm curious, like a couple of you said that not everyone can actually coach kids. So what are the characteristics? What are those necessities that a coach needs to possess to work with this age group, other than patience and flexibility?
Can I go? I can
Please.
go. I think it also requires a lot of thinking outside the box, thinking for individual clients, meaning the teenager or the youth that's coming to you. And I remember in my early days as a coach, a parent bringing a 10-year-old to me, and she stayed in the room with me for about 10 minutes, telling me all about her daughter. That was not a very good move, because now she planted the child in a particular light, which is remedial as to why the child needed coaching. And so when the parent left, this child and I were talking, and I was quite casual. I was more in parent mode than coach mode, like, what do you really like doing? And those kind of questions. And she started to talk about painting, a love for painting. And the more she spoke about it, I could see this light beginning to shine in her eyes at my curiosity for her, what she could do. And she picked that up and she went, okay, next week I will bring paint and teach you how to paint. And that's exactly what she did. And during this activity, where she's teaching me, and step by step, she was teaching me, she began to talk more about herself. And a mother's biggest concern was that she doesn't do any of her homework. She's quite rebellious in class, very disruptive, words that was being used against her in class, a mother just repeated to me. And so during this process, every time she completed a piece of work on the painting, I could link it to completion, and say, well, if you had to do your homework, what could you do? And look, in 1 hour, you did that much. Do you think you could do your homework in the same way? And I thought how lovely that was, because I learned through her eyes, or through her teaching me how activities and how to be flexible and agile with working with teenagers or working with children. So I think that's the one thing, to have this open-mindedness, thinking outside the box, and working with what's given to you in the least possible way.
Cindy, building on there, we've all encountered the term dancing with a client. I find this so true when it comes to this category of clients. And I'd like to narrate a small, small incident that happened. So in one of my sessions in working with, a late teen, so she loves food. So every time we would change the venue of our, coaching session, which normally I wouldn't do with an adult, because location, we're not so fussed about that, right? So we would pick every single cafe, which is comfortable for somebody at that age band. Though I was a little uncomfortable initially, music was too loud, and but okay, all that apart. In one of the, I think it was one session ago, she came in quite disoriented, right? And we went through. It was a longer than usual session, 45-50 minutes, and suddenly towards the end, from nowhere we went to the sweets counter. Conversation was just paused, just like that, right? We went there and we spoke about her dessert, and she wanted a chocolate, something very heavy and chocolatey. I politely declined, but I was very keen to. I was vicariously enjoying what she was doing. So she brought that in, and we continued our conversation. Suddenly, out of the blue, she goes, "Oh man, I love it!" And And I here was thinking that, she had an aha moment about the session or something, right? And she so effortlessly moved her entire and absolute focus to that chocolatey thing. And it was just so important, for me as a coach to let her be given to that indulgence. And from that conversation and from that moment, emerged a state of calm for her, emerged a state of true joy. And in about 15-20 minutes, she walked away just feeling so much more, so in such a more resourceful state than she was when she came. In a typical coaching and engagement, at least in my experience, I've never experienced something like that. A little strange, but I think it was just so important to dance in that moment with her and focus our entire attention to food, because that was the language that she was talking, that meant something to her, and let go of other parts of the conversation. I think this ability as a coach is very important.
The more you guys talk, the more I think that I'm a child, because you're speaking my language with the chocolate cake. And Nishmita, I'm glad you jumped in. I have a question for you actually after whatever comment you make. Go for it.
Okay. So one thing I think that is very important is showing vulnerability, in the sense that a lot of times as adults, I mean, okay, when I'm saying this, I'm speaking as a child, but we look at, children look at adults as, and they get very intimidated because adults find the need to, whenever you're, I mean, even if it's me, like I find the need to be perfect in front of a child. So the first thing that's going to cross the child's mind is, how do you know you aren't going through what I am, right? And it's, I think that's the most dangerous thing to do, because that's what makes a child feel unsafe, in to express, because they think that the adult is perfect, so they're going to be judged. So actually, this is something I want to throw as a question back to panelists as well. How do you show children that you are not perfect, and that you also have emotions and you can get upset and all of those things, but at the same time make sure that you're not throwing your emotional garbage on them? So, like, how do you be vulnerable and show them that you're not perfect, but at the same time not mess up, I guess?
Nishmita, can I just say, that's great. I totally love what you said, and I resonate with that. For me, it's be yourself, be authentic. I've noticed a big conversation about language that was happening in the chat, and I would never try and speak teen language. Plus, I wouldn't know half of it now anyway. The acronyms, etc., keep changing every few weeks. I think the other day I looked through some of the feedback from young people I'd worked with, and I noticed a pattern. And a lot of them said, Leah's just Leah, smiley, bubbly, always happy, never moody. And I think there was something that everyone mentioned was, we talked about my hobbies, like not mine, their hobbies, the children's hobbies. And they said for them that was something so lovely to be able to talk about as well. And I think just being authentic, but make sure no matter what stories you tell, it's age appropriate. They don't need to know everything, but little bits is okay. And so I always throw in little bits of experiences, or like Magda mentioned before, her dog, talk about my dog, or stories, just to show exactly, who you are. So for me, yeah, the vulnerability is important because it's your authenticity. We're only human. And I think that's really good for a young person to see that as well.
If no one else is jumping in, Nishmita, I wanted, oh, sorry, PG, go for it.
So I'll just say, do the same thing, what you would do with an adult client in, being authentic about your emotions, in being vulnerable, yet at the same time, not dumping your garbage on them. I think the same approach works with adults and children alike.
Nishmita, there is, I just want to go back to Carl Rogers. Whenever I'm in trouble, I go back to Carl Rogers. And one of the most difficult terms that he uses, seemingly so simple, is the word congruence, when he talks about congruence, empathy, and unconditional positive regard. For many people, the meaning is not clear. It wasn't clear to me for quite a long time, till I read and reread and reread. What he says is congruence is about your being authentic in your thoughts, in your speech, and your actions. Because as I said somewhere in the chat, children don't care about what you say. They can see through you because they follow what you do. Whereas adults lie. They use words to hide, create the facade, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't work with children. And Leah said earlier, and Vijay and others said, trust and intimacy is the most difficult thing that you need to really approach the kids with. And Carl Rogers says something beautiful. And if you listen to his, all of you have, and we took you through that, the Carl Rogers video of Coaching Gloria, along with other people, which is easily available on YouTube, where he comes from a Catholic or a Christian background. I don't know what it was, but very, very strict disciplinarian Christian background. And this was a woman who was divorced and she had a young child in the 60s who wanted to look for another man. And so, and the way that Rogers interacts with her. And somewhere in the book, he says, I'm not a Pollyanna. I don't expect everybody to be amazing and in that sense, unconditional positive regard. For me, the combination of congruence and unconditional positive regard and empathy lies in the fact that I'm able to share with them what I feel and tell them openly that, look, you know, this is my garbage coming out, and be vulnerable. And that, I think one of you used the word, you asked, without your bringing your emotional garbage. But if you can bring out your emotional garbage in a way that's highly vulnerable and be able to express a child, you know, it's okay to be that. And that does tremendous things to the validation of the child. Because especially in the age group of anywhere between 10 and 18, what the child is looking for is validation. The validation probably they're not getting from their caregivers or teachers or whoever it is. And that's what they're looking for from strangers. And which is why today, unfortunately, you have marauders on Facebook who prey on people who are looking for validation. And that's a result of that. So that is an area, especially the kind of work that you want to do, that could be extremely powerful.
Cindy, please.
Yeah, I like what Ram is saying, because it kind of alludes to so many aspects, the trust part and the language that we're using, and how to build our own resources if we are working with children. You know, there's the one thing I learned, of course, you know, when you start coaching, this thing about how you coach, this 80-20 rule, as some people call it, you know, how much of talking you do versus the client does. And when I started coaching children, teenagers in particular at that point, that all falls out the window. You know, it's not, if you stop talking and the client stops talking, then there's just a blank space. And sometimes that's good too, but not most of the time. So it's kind of, you know, how we change things and build resources for ourselves. So if coaches are thinking of working with children, you know, there's some of the things to consider. How you build a set of resources, like activities that Leah was talking about, or using language that's appropriate for kids, and doing what teenagers love at the moment, tech-savvy stuff with them, if that's what's appropriate for them. So I think there was a lot of points that Ram was talking about that we as coaches can use to build on.
Thanks, Cindy. I'm going to ask my question for Nishmita because I'm very curious. So Nishmita, You are still quite young. And the work that you're doing is with adolescents. So I'm curious to hear about your experiences with your work, because I know you recently went back to see the kids that you were working with. I'm just curious, as a different perspective, you being so much closer in age than a lot of situations we've talked about. You know, we just talked about language and authenticity. I would imagine that because you are close in age with people that you work with, that is a little easier to achieve authenticity and speak their language, etc. So yeah, just curious to hear any success stories and or, well, anything, frankly.
It's so funny that you say that because while doing my fellowship, I thought I was really young, but suddenly I felt so much older. You know, but yes, it definitely helped in many ways because I think especially with the girls, they were a lot more comfortable talking to me about crushes and just like things like that. Maybe not directly, but indirectly. And um, with with the boys, it was all sometimes they wouldn't directly speak about it, but unless they knew that they were very safe there, but they would start opening up about what happens in their community, about how whether or not they have access to alcohol and drugs and things like that. while and so while that was a good huge advantage in one sense, knowing how to deal with that was a challenge, and very tricky, like very important challenge, because how do you address that issue without breaking their trust, without you go and tell, like, speak to their parents, they're going to get a nice whack and they will never, like, they wouldn't even want to come to school again. But what do you do to kind of, how do you get through to them and say that okay, this is not good at this age, um but yeah, I mean, the biggest opportunity there, I think, was just the fact that they were so much more open, and they kind of knew, that, like, yeah, she knows what we're going through and what we're talking about. She's done, or she does what we do, stuff like that. Like, maybe not directly, but they kind of, that was there.
Yeah, so perhaps we should, as a society, invest in a bit more peer coaching programs and teaching young people how to coach, because this kind of, yeah, intimacy and trust could be established much more easily. And as people in the comments have been saying, I wish I had this kind of interaction with an adult, or I wish I was coached when I was younger. Wouldn't the world be a better place? So I encourage all of you to look at the comments and head to the forum after this session, because I think this is going to be a very interesting long-term discussion. And Leah does want to jump in, but because we only have about 13 minutes left, as the rest of you jump in, I want to ask that you focus your kind of last words on the benefits that you see of this kind of work. All of us here touch coaching in some way or another, so we're all aware of the overall benefits of coaching. But I think it's becoming really obvious through the session and through the chat that with children and teenagers, there's so much more than with adults. And Fiona left a comment: let's all treat our vulnerability or humanness with tenderness. Oh, I wish I had been with someone who showed me this when I was a child. How true. Leah?
It is, I mean, how true. That's such a lovely statement. And I think someone asked for a tip on coaching their teenager. Oh, well, I mean, there's many, but if I could just give one tip, is be the person that you wish you had when you were a teenager. We were all teenagers. They're all tough years for everyone, regardless of whether you've had an upbringing in poverty or abusive or really good, positive, prosperous. You've all gone through difficulties as a teenager. So be that person that you wish you had. And also, what would you say to your teenage self if you had the opportunity? Think deep and ask yourself those questions. the power of coaching is massive. From my experience, the outcomes I've seen: improved grades in schools, enjoying school, actually realizing the benefits of school. School can be good and fun. It's the perspective that's taken and the experiences. Bullying's a big issue, online, face-to-face, and coaching around bullying is really important because it can help people deal with bullying, but also the bullied to understand why they are and to change their behaviors. When I was setting up a project in Uganda, I originally started working with adults, and it was adults coaching young people. And then I had this aha moment, as we all do as coaches and everyone does, when I was with the young people that were about to be coached, and suddenly they all naturally broke out into a peer coaching, peer mentoring session and starting to help each other. And instantly I changed my entire approach. I thought, this is more powerful than what I've seen with the adults that I was training. So luckily I had the time. I had another 4 weeks. So it was like, right, scrap this, start again. And the adults then went into peer mentoring group, peer coaching, peer mentoring groups, and they became the facilitators while the young people brought the subject to the group that was affecting them most. That was powerful. So I think peer mentoring, yes, definitely. Really, 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 really powerful there. I did just want to say something, because I know we haven't got much time left, but just one little challenge, and then hopefully we'll end on a good positive. But one challenge I did want to mention was when working with young people, some bad examples I have seen that must be avoided is closure done inappropriately of coaching with young people. You might be the very first person that young person has had in their life that makes them happy, that's made them think about themselves, that they respect you. And, that's really quite a powerful impact, especially if things at home haven't changed or at school. And that relationship can mean the world to them. So just from experience, I really recommend you do set a date for when that coaching mentoring will finish, and you make it very, very clear when that is. And don't say it all the time, otherwise you'll cause some kind of anxiety, but to mention it now and then. Okay, you're doing fantastic, we've got 4 months left together, what other areas want to look in? And just another thing to avoid is premature ending of a coaching or mentoring relationship. So the coach can't work with them anymore, or something happens. That's very important to make sure, if you're running a project, that your mentors and coaches are 100% committed to that. Overall, absolute powerful effects of coaching young people. Thank you. That was mostly what I wanted to say there.
Thanks, Leah. Who's jumping in next? Nishmita.
I can. So I think one of the most powerful things about coaching, especially teenagers, is that, during this phase, they are all of a sudden they're questioning things, they're questioning everything. And also I think they, in a way, they have a very strong sense of self, strangely, because they know what they're, especially with friendships, they know exactly what they're looking for, And while coaching is all about how a person can develop themselves so that they can be self-sufficient, I think this is such a crucial age, because they know exactly what they want from other people. So if we can talk to them and get them to figure out ways in which that they can be that for themselves, in which they can be, their own best friends, and what more powerful, how much more powerful could that be if we can start at that age? Yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
I'll go next, Magda. Two key areas where, actually, let me just pick one. Building on what Nishmita was saying, the teens or the young adult years, as we all know, is a very, very crucial time to who you will be for the rest of your life. And I think so coaching at this age um, has a far greater social responsibility, I would say, especially in allowing people at that age an authentic expression and in figuring out their identities. This question of, who am I and who do I want to be? Apart from narrow sort of labels of career, profession, etc. Those are the kind of obvious questions that they go through. But some of the deeper questions, right? We talk about values and value systems. It's at this time that gets built. And coaching is a powerful space where that articulation can happen in a very natural way. And we give space for expression. So I think if we want to make coaching, a thriving part of our society, this group and this age must experience coaching. It starts here. And let's recognize the reality that either because of lack of awareness about what coaching is, lack of affordability, this is the group that rarely gets access to a coach. So then what's the solution? I think if it's possible, and here is more like an appeal that I'd like to make to all coaches here, at whatever stage of your coaching journey it is, if it is possible for each of us to make that difference, to offer that coaching space to any one young adult or as many young adults as we can. I think we give them that powerful tool to work with. And if they understand the power and benefit of coaching, imagine what they would do when they become parents or they get into the workplace. And that's how coaching can become big. I think it's a great thing we can do. And the advantage here is that you don't need a detailed, huge, 8-session, 12-session kind of program. Even a single coaching conversation can make that difference. So go out there and offer yourself. You don't need the label that this is coaching, but when you get a chance, an opportunity to have that conversation, make it a coaching conversation, because we all know how beautiful and powerful that can be. So that's the thought, and that's the energy that I'm also picking up from this group. And a nascent thought is obviously energizing me, and that's my appeal and my last sort of closing remarks in today's conversation. Thank you.
VG, I'll do you one better. So I just posted the links to our YouTube channel as well as to our forum. Anyone who's interested in starting with something like this, please go to the forum. There's today's session is there as a topic. Please comment that you'd be interested in doing this. So for those of you already in the Coacharya training community, as of today, we're starting some online peer coaching initiative, which we will expand to everybody in a couple of weeks. But we can easily, with the numbers that we have behind Coacharya, start something where people who are listening here, who are coaches, could volunteer as coaches. And all of us here, no teenagers, no kids, we can tell those young people that we know somebody who'd be happy to talk to them. And then Coacharya can use our distribution network to tell other young people this is available. So, at Coacharya, we're all about democratizing coaching and bringing it to more people. One of the goals of this forum, and the reason why we called it Coaching Across Boundaries, is we want to remove those boundaries. We want to coach across them. So this is one ginormous boundary that we could overcome together with leadership people like Viji and Leah and Cindy and Nishmita and Ram and all of you. So please, please, please go to the forum, add in your name, and I will be in touch in about a week or so, and we'll get something going. But Viji, you're going to be there too, yeah? Cindy, sorry, I think I interrupted you. You were about to go. I got excited.
That's okay. So what I want to say is quite short. It's just building on what's already been said. When coaching starts with a young person, it's normally about action or behavior as a start point. And as they grow in the journey, they change. And you see, a transformation into more confidence, more life skills, just so much more begin to emerge. And this may not make a huge impact on social progress, but it does add up. So I think, if we want to make some difference, we can start with our young people.
I think it will make a huge impact on our social progress, Cindy. I mean, if we can impact this generation, sky is the limit. So yeah. Ram, anything, Nishmita?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The last words on this, as it were, Magda, is that I see from the conversation and what has been posted in the chat, that there's a far greater need for coaches to try and coach the caregivers, parents, and teachers. And that's where the real start is. I think whenever we say that we want to coach young people, I think in some ways we are taking away the responsibility of what the parents and caregivers should do. And we should support them first. And maybe when there is a real need for us to come in, Mervyn had asked about some questions about how to work with kids in bereavement, for example. And Nishmita works with adults who have been abused, all that kind of stuff. So those are adolescents, sorry. And those are the kind of things where maybe the coaches can add some special value, where they require much further support. So there's a thought I would like to leave. So there could be multiple streams where coaches work with caregivers, parents, and teachers, work with perhaps empowering children in a way for better potential and performance, and possibly with those who are disadvantaged in some way, underprivileged, whatever. Thanks.
Something I want to add is, yes, the thought of us impacting them is so exciting, but what's more exciting is the thought of them impacting us, because especially given what that generation cares so much about, they really care about the environment, and all of us need to grow in that awareness, and just listening to them and spending so much more time there is going to help us become better people. So that's really, really exciting.
And certainly better coaches, Nishmita.
Okay, I'm super excited. I cannot tell you. I wanted us to have this session because I thought it was important, and I'm so happy about the chat and about the panelists and the ideas that are coming up. So please watch this space. For those of you who are watching or listening to this later, please head to forum.coacharya.com and express your interest in joining this community, and let's make an impact together. Let's help the parents and the kids. Why not? We have the skills, we have the time. Well, kind of. We'll make the time. As Ram always says, if you want it to happen, it's going to happen. Just do it, right? It's what we're here for. So if there are no further words from the panelists, I'm just going to say thank you. And I hope that everyone takes this positive energy from for me this morning, for you maybe this evening, and spread it in your communities, spread it in the forum. I will see all of you here tomorrow and the next day and the next day until November 1st, because today is not the first session and not the last. So thanks so much for your time today. Thank you so much to the panelists. And I think I'll be seeing all of you in a few different sessions on this particular topic soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good day to all of you. Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.